Hi everyone, I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It with Mir McLean, a graduate student at Maryland Women's Basketball. Thanks for coming on the show today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
So, I want to talk a little bit about Greek life today. I feel like it is such a big part of the overall college experience in the US, but it's not really talked a lot about in athletics. And I feel like a lot of people are really interested in it. There's a lot of assumptions made about people that are in Greek life. Can you talk a little bit about how you're involved in Greek life and how that got started for you?
Yeah, so I'm an AKA. My mom's an AKA, so I'm part of a legacy. That's how I first got introduced to it at such a young age for people who know. But I was looking forward to it going into college. I knew that was something that I wanted to do by the time I graduated. So I first went to UConn, and they didn't have an active org there. So I just kind of like went to a lot of their interest meetings and things like that because they were starting to, promote it back into college life there. And then 2 years in, I transferred to Virginia, which is where I crossed. And that was just something that I was super excited about once I heard they were starting a line there because they hadn't done one in a little bit.
Yeah, that's such a common experience, especially I would say for Black girls that are trying to join organizations within the Divine Nine. Do you mind explaining a little bit more about AKA and the Divine Nine in general? I feel like some people who are in other aspects of Greek life might not know what you mean by crossed or interest meetings.
Yeah, so AKA stands for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And it's a part of the D9, which is basically like a black organization or black, I don't know, like it's a whole bunch of individual orgs between sororities and fraternities, like black historically pronounced. For me, I associate more with AKA, which is like about like mankind and culture and just learning and like having being service to mankind, but it's not like different sororities where like they pick you. It's more so you have to go and venture out and do that on your own, do your own research, and if that's something that you're interested in. And then once you figure out like this is what I want to join, or this is the thing that I'm interested in, or the thing that fits me the most, you go to interest meetings or like little like info sessions where you learn more about the program or the organization from their point of view versus like what you can just look up online.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that will help people. I feel like, especially being like the Black girl on the team, like you always get these questions. I
Yeah.
mean, I think for me, like both of my parents are Greek. My mom's an AK, my dad's a Q. And so I was always raised with an understanding of these things, but I always think it's better to have someone that's part of those organizations come up and speak about it. So I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
I want to talk some more about that, but let's jump into like sorority life in college. There's a lot of assumptions and misconceptions about Greek life. What have you experienced, and what are some of those common things that you might get on campus?
The ones that I don't really like are like kind of similar to the ones that relate to like an athlete, like, oh, they're just dumb, or like they just want to party, or like they have no focus in life, or like they're just here for like the party life college experience. But I feel like it's a lot more than that. We do a lot of like volunteer work with like homeless people or like anybody in need or like things like making food for people who need food or things like that. And I feel like a lot of that is respected, but people don't really know that to be true in like sorority, fraternity, college life. So I think that that's something that I guess stigma that I don't really like is like we're just partiers or things like that. So
Yeah, how did your coaches respond when you joined or you expressed interest? Did you have to ask? Because I know people who've like had to ask their coaches to join, and sometimes they get denied. What was that experience like for you?
So I knew that because my mom's an AKA and she also played basketball. So I knew going in that that was something that I had to be aware of with my coach, especially like when you're going through the process, how it can take up a lot of your time. And like basketball had already taken up a lot of my time. So just finding that space. But I think more so just being able to communicate, which is funny because I didn't communicate with my coaches because I didn't want to be denied. So I just had to kind of do it behind their backs. But afterwards, they were really happy and proud of me.
That's awesome. And I do you feel like that would be a big difference for someone trying to join a sorority not in the Divine Nine? Do you think it would be a different experience or similar?
I think it would be a different experience. I don't know much about that process outside of the D9, but I do know like when I was going through it, like I had to communicate with a small group of people to let them know. And especially like because basketball is such a long sport, I had to do it like in the spring where it was kind of like dying down versus like ramping up in December. So I think that helped me a lot too, is just trying to work my schedule, like my everyday schedule around going through the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's another thing where sororities and fraternities kind of get a bad rap sometimes, that sorority girls are only talking with people that they're in their sorority, that they're, prissy in some way, that they don't care about other things going on, that they're only worried about each other. How has that been for you experience wise? Like, do you feel like your commitment level is challenged by your organization compared to basketball? Like, how have you been able to manage all of those things?
Yeah, they are very demanding, both of them in their own way. I think they're very similar though, because just in the way that sorority girls always hang out with sorority girls, like basketball players always hang out with basketball players, like it's not that different. Like I'm always with my teammates. I'm with my teammates every single day, like even on an off day. But there's a time where like the ball stops bouncing like at the end of the day, and then that's when I would pick up my AKA stuff or like anything that like my sisters would need help with. So it was very like I knew when basketball would be over, I knew when practice would start, when practice would end, and then I knew my free time after. And it was just my decision whether I wanted to like help out or, do something in the background. So it kind of worked out because it doesn't like they're both very demanding, but very demanding in their little time segment. So it's not as hard as you would think.
I love that you said that. And especially with like basketball players, I'll hang out with basketball players, like party culture. Like people always attach partying and these crazy morals to sororities or fraternities. Athletes, especially at some schools,
Yeah.
get into probably worse, if not just as many parties and like kind of questionable things sometimes. I always think that's kind of funny. Like you'll hear a teammate be like, "Oh, that sorority girl." I'm like, "You don't think like what you were
Yeah, there's a cross here.
I love that you said that, and I think that will hopefully that resonates with some people, and they're kind of gonna think a second time, like of they when they say something like that. Do you know a lot of other student athletes at Maryland who are part of Greek life, and kind of what is the mix there?
Yeah, so I know a few just from being here since the summer. I know a lot more at UVA. A lot of us crossed around the same time.
Does that make it easier, do you think, than if you were the only one?
Yeah, I feel like there's other people that I can like relate to on a different level other than like athlete. There's another like tier to go talk about.
So let's start thinking about our listeners here who are considering joining a sorority or fraternity. What are some of the things they should think about before they, start going to these interest meetings or start the process?
I feel like they should definitely look into each individual, like if you're joining a frat or if you're joining a sorority, like you should look into each individual one because they are very different. I will say there are some overlaps, but really aren't that many. Like they all have their individual characteristics about each org that makes them different, and trying to figure out which one you could see yourself in, or like if you know anybody that are in those orgs or like any famous people, because a lot of like celebrities or things like that, like are in those orgs that people may not know of, and like maybe you take after a role model or like a celebrity or an author or something like that in the public eye that you never knew was a part of that. And I feel like if you can like do a lot of your research early, you can you can figure out if one you want to do it to begin with, and then two which one suits you enough in order for you to be able to be successful in that org.
I think that's such good advice. And that's so true for like college recruiting and stuff too. Like when you're picking a program for a
Exactly.
job, like
Yeah.
the people that do well in this team, like do they have my personality? Like
Yeah, exactly.
values of this coach, does that fit how I play? That's really good advice. And then what advice or guidance would you give for the process of getting started? Once they kind of know and have identified what they align with, what kind of steps would they take to join?
I would say like keep your grades up, because once you get started, your grades might slip because there's like more of a focus on now two different things that need most of your time. And if you don't, then it could potentially harm both basketball and your org success.
Everyone listening here is pretty much a college athlete and is, I would say, looking for opportunities to connect on campus and just try to better themselves. So any advice that you would have on the topic or otherwise before we end today?
I would just say like use like your athletic ability, like you being a athlete to your advantage. Like a lot of orgs don't really have that because it's so rare that people actually want to do another demanding thing in their schedule. So like if you know someone in the org that you want to join, starting to get to know them more, or like on a personal level, or invite them to a game or something like that. Something cool, because not a lot of people really, especially like women's basketball, people don't really have that experience of going to a game or things like that. So just like using that ability to be able to help you in the long run.
That's such a great take. Thank you for coming on the show today, Mir.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, it's Sydney. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. If you did, make sure to leave a review and send it to a friend. Let's keep this conversation going. I'll see you guys next week.